working.
Is she? Okay.
No, she's at the hospital.
That's too bad.
I know.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Because the sooner we get started, the more we can listen to John tell us, and so on. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Suzanne Mudge, the Executive Director for Youth Music Monterey. And before we begin the interview with our guest, I'd like to recognize several people. They may or may not be on this Zoom session. Donko Drusko, our music director, board members Dorothy Micheletti, Ed Gavrin, Peter Meckel, Amanda Friedman, Joanne Hatch. And we are also grateful to Joanne and Russell Hatch for their season's support of our series, Fresh Perspectives. And we'd also like to recognize the Sequestered Super Supper Society, a devoted group of our YMM community. Many of them are part of our Angel Network. Sandy Borthwick, Gloria Souza, Christine and Alan Kemp, Melanie and Bill Silva, Leslie and Bob Mulford, Susan and Mads Bier, and Sue and Rolf Donahauer. And if any of you are interested in sponsoring a future masterclass or interview of our Fresh Perspective series, please get in touch with me through our website or by telephone. So, a few things about John, and I have to put on my reading glasses because I'm reading on my iPhone, which is teeny tiny writing. So John has written many scores for television, for film, symphony orchestras. It runs the gamut. He is now, I think, handling several commissions that he's received in the last few years. And looking forward to composing them and premiering them, of course, when we come out of this pandemic. And I'm sure that's put up a little bit of a roadblock in the process. And he is currently now down in Big Sur, or not actually there right now, but this week is his residency down in Big Sur at the Glen Devon Ranch, courtesy of the Big Sur Land Trust. And this is where he has spent quite a bit of time composing and communing with nature, which inspires so much of his work. And just a few factual things. John received his Bachelor of Music degree in music composition with a minor in viola performance at the American University. He received a Master of Arts degree in music composition with an emphasis in film scoring for motion pictures, television, and multimedia at New York University. He studied primarily with Justin Della Gioia of the Juilliard School. Is that Norman Della Gioia's offspring?
That's his son. His
yeah.
strange son,
I know Norman Della Gioia's music from playing in wind ensembles and so.
Exactly.
Scenes from the Louvre, right? That's what's one of his things.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a little bit about John. And I'm going to throw out the first question and ask you who or what inspired you to make music your life? And composition in particular. Did you always want music as a career?
I started in, like many of you out there, I started when I was about 5 or 6 years old, learning the piano by ear. And then my mother got me into the youth orchestra. So I started playing the viola at about age 6. I started on several instruments. I went from flute to saxophone to violin and clarinet. My armature wasn't strong enough, so I ended up on viola because everybody else played violin. And then from I got into the youth orchestra, which toured every year. So when I got in there, they had just gotten back from like former Yugoslavia, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. So I practiced really hard, and by the time I was 11, I got into that youth orchestra. And then we started touring. So we went to former Soviet Union, we went to China, we went to Korea, we went to Spain, we went all around the world, and it was great as a young kid. And so that's what inspired me to play music and to be involved in music.
Okay, and from there you just decided you wanted to go to college and major in music?
Actually, I ended up at American University because I was actually a double major in business finance. And
This is the hidden life of John Wineglass.
right, yeah, yeah. So American University is not, it's not known for its music. I was actually there for, Colgate School of Business. I was there. My scholarship actually was in the School of Business, and music was kind of a side thing that I was doing. But I was doing full semesters and then summers, and it just got too hectic where I just knew I wasn't going to be able to finish both degrees within 4 years. And so I dropped the business degree, which ended up taking away my scholarship. But I was able to find another scholarship and finish music there. I studied with Margaret Ward. She was with the Washington Opera and sub for the National Symphony, and Yuri Watzazug, who actually still plays in the Washington Opera today. I studied with them, and then Osman Kivrak, who was this Turkish violist who played with the Baltimore String Quartet. So those are my main teachers among, from the university aspect. And it's not necessarily about always the school you go to, it's who you study with. That's really the point. And plus I was just doing a minor. So, and Hagmar Derosian was my main composition teacher at American University. And then I started moving, then I went to New York.
Okay, cool. So as a violist, I'm wondering, does the years of playing viola in symphony orchestras and in other settings, has that informed your compositional style?
That is so awesome. You're the third person I've had. This is the third Zoom in like a week. I did at University of Southern California with Maestro Carl St. Clair, and then I did Monterey Symphony. They had another thing, and they asked the same question. And I say it very much informs me because I usually sat fourth chair, which is right in front of the first oboe. And so hearing all the sounds of the orchestra as a young kid really informed me on how, especially the violas, how they work with the second violins a lot, especially if you're studying Brahms or any of those kind of composers, Beethoven. I learned how to orchestrate just by listening to those guys and having that same, education as a kid. And it's the reason why I still play today, because it gives me that perspective with an orchestra today.
That's very interesting. Do you write really awesome viola parts then? For your fellow brethren?
Of course. It's so funny you asked, because so I've been doing a lot of these remote recordings. So I did a string arrangement for artists during COVID in Nashville. And I always get the compliment that, oh my gosh, this is great viola parts. Like, and that's when I know I've done my job. And I don't necessarily write, especially even for pop music, I don't write a lot of easy football arrangements. When I say football arrangements, I mean whole notes and things like that. Yeah. I really write very involved contrapuntal lines, and I love movement. So I do a lot of that.
Great. Have you had any frustrations or challenges in your career?
I would say frustrations, not necessarily. I believe that, when you choose your path, that it makes room for you. And so do I struggle getting up sometimes in the morning, like I have to do tomorrow morning to finish this commission? Yes, I do. But aside from a struggle, sometimes I do, there's always crunch time. And then like right now, I just did a piece for the Portland Symphony, and then my copyist and I, we missed some things in the score. So I had to go back and send, the correct celeste part. Those are frustrating things that sometimes we miss. And this was a commission that came out of the blue, and I only had 2 weeks to write it. It's a 4-minute work with a lot of notes. But we missed a couple of things in our edition. So those things are frustrating, because when I'm trying to work on something else, I have to go back to the score and kind of finagle with all that. And he's on the East. Yeah, actually he lives in Indiana. And so there's time difference things and things like that, but not really major frustrations. I really enjoy what I do. I like to do a lot of different things though. If I was only composing, I would probably lose my mind. So I'm a professor at Stanford University, at Cal State University. I love to perform. I love to arrange. I love to do kind of a lot of different things. So it keeps me, pretty engaged.
So you've received 3 Emmys for your work on daytime TV, and as I mentioned earlier, you've done so many scores for television and for films. What moved you to composing for symphony orchestras, or is that something you always wanted to do? Is that a sort of later in your life kind of path that you've taken?
No, when I was a lot of your kids' age, for 8 years, all I listened to was Brahms, Beethoven, and Bach. So I have a steep education in classical music. And when I was 6 years old, I used to always write my own music on notebook paper for my cousins, and I had a little orchestra, I used to call it, and I used to conduct, and it was crazy. But I've always had this desire to be in the concert hall world. But television world called me, and it's a very lucrative field, and has provided me the means to be able to kind of do more of the real work in terms of commissions and things of that sort.
So on the topic of composition, remembering some past conversations you and I had a few years ago, you derive so much of your inspiration and ideas from the land, the geography, the physical beauty of Big Sur. You, I think, have done some joint projects with local artists. But these sort of things are very important in your work. And you want to be there physically and spiritually present, I think, on the land, in the land, and for inspiration. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how the process works for you?
It's ironic that you asked that, because I drove down today, and that area, particularly Big Sur, just inspires me. And literally driving, after I got through the Highlands, I came up with the first. Well, I have several sketches, but I have an idea for the opening of I'm writing a concerto for violin and orchestra for Edwin Huizinga with the Monterey Symphony. And I have several openings of how the first movement is going to go. But then the third version came to me by way of actually your instrument, trombone.
Yes.
So I was actually so it's a solo trombone. Well, not really solo. I mean, it's the main part in the thread of what I'm talking about. But I'll probably send you a transcript to see if it's playable. It's
great. Hey, anytime we can get some melodic content or stand out, we're happy to do it. So.
Right. So it's the irony that it's trombone and then I'm talking to you today is just nuts. Yeah.
Well, let's call it divine intervention,
Exactly.
inspiration as well. How would you characterize your compositional language?
Oh yeah. I'm a tonal guy. I like tonality, which is not necessarily favored in academia these days. But I can write in those, styles of, the thing about, well, let's just that's a two-way question. As a TV composer, you're taught to be a chameleon. So you're taught to be able to write in various styles, various genres, various things of that sort. And so, but as a concert hall composer, I really, I can dwell in the world of atonality, which, with like the Cabrillo Music Festival, that's, it's new music, so contemporary music. So it calls for that. So that language has to be there. So I'm able to obviously write in that style. And that came through a lot of my lessons and studies with Justin Della Gioia. He really opened my eyes, studying Messiaen and studying Persichetti, were a bunch of composers that we looked at to help open my palette. But at some point I always kind of come back to tonal center. And I think that's a centeredness, spiritually and just in other ways that grounds me and in some ways. but I write in all kinds of styles, and well versed in any of them for sure. But I don't necessarily let a style or a school of thought rule how I compose something. There are people who are minimalists, and they write in that style. That's kind of what they do. Philip Glass being a very dear friend of mine, and that's what he does. I don't necessarily have a codified style in that way.
Okay.
Except for tonality, probably. Yeah.
That's a big style.
Yeah.
So how do you work? Do you spend the same amount of time on composing every day? Like you get up and you from 8 to 12 you work on your music and then that's it? Or do you have marathon sessions of composing? How does that all work? And I'm sure part of the commission, the lineup of commissions you have is driving that too.
Yeah, I have marathon sessions. I used to when my daughter was younger. I would put her down to bed and then and then write into the wee hours of the morning. But since 2012, when I had that first commission with Marin Alsop, I decided to try a new thing of kind of going away to write. So, I go down to Pismo Beach, I go down to Big Sur, I get to go to areas and develop residencies with other Yosemite. I go there and just shut away. And those can be like when I leave tonight to go back down to Big Sur, tomorrow will be an easily 16-hour day,
Wow. How was it working with
that'll.
Sorry.
Oh, she's amazing. I've known her from the Baltimore Symphony days. I used to play in a symphony called Soulful Symphony. I used to do side-by-side concerts with James Carney, who's the concert master at the time in the Baltimore Symphony. And so I've known her from back then. And then we met again at Cabrillo Music Festival. So she's an amazing tour de force, an amazing, iconic conductor and musician.
Indeed. Yeah. I worked for her up in San Francisco. She came and conducted it was actually a video that we put together that featured Haley Joel Osment and that very, very young singer with that voice, who I can't even remember her name now, but it was a lot of fun to work with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since much of our community is students, young musicians, for young musicians who are interested in composing or arranging, what would you suggest that they learn about music composition? What's important for them to know or have in their grasp to begin composing? What sort of tools? What is it? It's theory, it's ideas, etc.
Yeah. I would say theory. And I know I'm a purist, so I'm kind of old school. I really believe in 4-part writing, that really teaches you how to, I'm talking about from the Well-Tempered Clavier of Bach and his way of writing, those rules that you learn so that you can learn to break them later on. But they're rules of composition that I still carry to this day. And voice leading and things like that are used in the composition process. And I also will use more 20th century, 19th century techniques like Schoenberg's atonality or his serialism. I use that.
You've done that then.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I use it quite a bit when I run out of ideas, even motivically. I need something, or a retrograde inversion of a melody, or inversion of a melody, or I use all those techniques. Those are composition techniques that you learn in school, and so those are things that I tend to lean on, especially if I'm running out of ideas.
So Caden Bloomer, are you with us? I think Caden has a question to ask you. I'd like to.
Yeah, I am here.
So, Caden is our first oboe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So what have been significant influences like on your musical life and your career in general, just as a composer?
Influences, you mean as in composers or just?
Yeah, your like influence for composing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, nature is a big influence, but as far as in particular people, I'm a huge fan of a lot of different composers. Philip Glass, who I've met several times. I'm a huge fan of his work. John Carigliano at Lehman College at the time. Met him a couple of times there, worked with him at the Cabrillo Music Festival, big fan of his music. A big fan of William Grant Steele. I was African-American composer back in the day. There's a number of them. John Adams, I could go down the list. Christopher Rouse, who we just lost about a year ago. So there's a lot of composers. And then I said Brahms, Beethoven, and Bach. They're close harmonies of how they use the viola and second violins. You'll see that in a lot of my compositions, a lot.
Thank you. Is that enough of an answer, Caden? Do you have anything more you'd like to ask John?
No, thank you. That's really
Okay. Elias, are you with us? Elias Osorio? I think you've got a question as well. Earth to Elias? Okay, we'll wait for him to come back on. I have a question just regarding so many commissions that you're getting. Has it been super stressful, or are you just so incredibly exhilarated with so much to do that it's like a totally joyful life at this point?
It's a little stressful. I mean, right now I have 3 solid works. Well, I mean, more than that, actually.
Can you tell us about them?
Oh, yeah. The ones I'll be working on this weekend. The first piece is Christina Mock commissioned for me to write a solo violin work for her, which is going to premiere in January, late January. And that's solo violin and electronics, which I plan to use. So that's going to be an interesting piece. It's called Alone, and it's going to be about 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which is based off of kind of the George Floyd idea and a tribute to him. But really kind of focusing on the pandemic and kind of how we are alone. So it's a pretty intense piece. And then kind of mirroring that piece as well, I have a 4-symphony commission work with San Jose Chamber, Fresno Phil, Pacific Symphony, and Monterey Symphony. And that piece is going to be for strings and 2 percussion. I think I asked for a harp player today. So hopefully I'll get that. And that's a piece called Alone Together. And you said things are opening, but we're actually doing a virtual version of that piece. And so it'll be all of the musicians from those various orchestras on a not Zoom like this, but on a high produced version of the premiere, and it'll premiere online virtually, and then all the orchestras will do it once we open up. That's the second piece, and then the third piece, I'm really kind of the violin concerto for it's concerto for violin and orchestra, and that's for Evan Hoysinger with the and I'll be with Monterey Symphony. And he's a dear friend. We've spent a lot of time down at Big Sur. We've done camps together, and so he's a good friend. And so those are kind of the 3 works that I'm working on now. Because of COVID, I actually got 2 works put off for another year. So thank God. And one is going to be for an orchestra in Pittsburgh. And that's another huge piece with that's 6 movements with full chorus, mezzo, soprano, and baritone. So it's a large work. 3 movements are already done. Actually, my last concert in February was the 3 movements, which is the symphonic version, and now I'm writing the choral part to it with soloists. So that's a big piece.
So what's the
put off for a year.
essence of that? What is it? Is it programmatic in nature?
What was that? Your question? I'm sorry.
That 6 movement work you just talked about, is that programmatic in nature?
Yeah, it's called Buried on Morn on Mark, and it's with a historian that I met, and it's about the Middle Passage. It's about the slave ships that came from West Africa and settled in South Carolina. I got the project because actually the historian who's the librettist, she, through her research at Carnegie Mellon, she's a huge historian and has an installation at the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian. She saw my last name and said, "Oh my gosh, he's the guy I want to hire to do this." And so we went over. I was in Africa last year, in West Africa, Cape Verde, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, all over. I was in Lisbon, Portugal, because a lot of that music kind of filtered its way down into West Africa. And we recorded sounds. The second movement is full of sounds from the rice fields, the former rice fields of West Africa, and also those rice fields in South Carolina. So it's a heavy piece. The first movement is basically like a slave ship, basically, and it's a pretty very involved piece.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. And that came at that third. I actually like that piece came after I had 3 other symphonic works being done in 1 year that I wrote in 1 year. So that was the 4th one, 2018, 2019. And then they had subsequent performances, with the last one being in February with the San Bernardino Symphony down in Southern California. So,
well, I look forward to hoping that 6th movement work might be played out here on the West Coast.
Yeah, it was with San Bernardino Symphony.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the 6th? Yeah, the 6th version.
Yeah, the one you just described. Yeah.
Right. There's a 3-movement version, and then there's a 6-movement version with chorus. Right.
Yeah. Wow. Elias, are you with us for your question before we move along?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that last time.
Elias Osorio, he's a euphonium player.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So do you have any favorite musicians or composers? And if so, why do they matter to you? Or why are they important to you?
Oh yeah, it's kind of going back to the question asked earlier. Yeah, Philip Glass, Christopher Rouse is a very Jennifer Higdon. I love her work, and I study a lot of their scores, and they're impactful. As a young kid, though, Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach were my go-to guys. I love Mendelssohn. I love all the Dvorak. I love all the heavy hitter guys as well. And then in the film world, I love kind of the old school guys. So Bernard Herrmann, Max Roach, Max Steiner. Max Roach is a jazz guy.
Yes.
Max Steiner, Shostakovich actually did some, Korngold also did some film scores. I kind of like the old school guys. And then some of my mentors that are contemporaries now, Alan Silvestri is a very dear friend, who did the Avengers. He's pretty phenomenal.
Alan lives locally.
Yes, he does. Yeah. He's
makes wine.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He's a dear friend. Him and his wife are very dear friends of ours, and he's a major composer, awesome composer. Mark Mancina is also a local guy here too. And then of course, John Williams and those guys, pretty phenomenal in the television world, which is a very different process than the concert hall world.
So what are some important ideas and concepts to impart to our young and aspiring musicians?
Well, I always tell my students at the university, wherever I'm teaching, is that a lot of my success has come from being an opportunist. You probably see me everywhere. And so being open to the opportunity. I think Oprah is the one that said, success is opportunity. Preparing is what success is preparedness meeting opportunity. So there's been several situations where I've just been at the right place at the right time in the right room. My first television show came because a guy didn't want to write. He wanted to write for Broadway, so he gave me the number to this music supervisor, and I called him that day, sent him my resume because it was the very last day. And lo and behold, that guy, Terry Walker, became my music supervisor for 15 years on my first television show. And so opportunity is a huge thing, and you're only as good as your word. So, deadlines are important. I try to be early as much as possible. Things happen, but opportunity, you have to be out there. A lot of times as musicians, we try to be pretty myopic and stay in our lane and in our huddle. But a lot of successful guys that I know, the Alan Silvestri, especially in the television film world, the Hans Zimmers, they're have major charisma, and especially when you're dealing with directors, it's important to be able to have fun and be able to connect to people. It'd be very difficult if you're not a people person in this business.
One of our young violists asks, what is your favorite viola composition or any composition in general?
Oh, wow. Well, I love with Roberto Diaz, with the Monterey Symphony, we did the Walton Viola Concerto, which is pretty phenomenal. I've never played it. It's very difficult. But I love that piece. The Telemann Viola Concerto is my first concerto I ever played by memory when I was 11 years old with the youth orchestra. I was a part of a concerto competition. And so to this day, I can play that concerto from my memory, including all the cadenzas and everything, because I learned it at such a young age. So that's one of my favorite viola concertos. Ernest Bloch, that's another great viola concerto. I love the Brandenburg number 6, which is for 2 violas. That's a great one because you're 8th note apart. So you're right, so that's a fun piece. I played that with my teacher when she turned 80 years old. Flew back to DC and we did that first movement together. So
Former conductor of the Carmel Bach Festival, Bruno Weil,
yes,
used to say that the longest viola joke is Harold in Italy. By Berlioz.
Of course. Oh, there's always one.
Yeah, there's another one. The Walton is a fantastic piece. That's so, Kalia, hopefully that answers your question. There's another question here regarding composition. How do you compose now? Is it all on paper from your head? Do you utilize computer technology?
I do sketches, so I do have staff paper here that I do sketches on. I do voice memos, so my telephone, I have me singing like that trombone thing that we were talking about earlier. That's on a voice memo because I was driving, and so I'll put ideas on a voice memo, and then I catalog them. And the iPhones are great because you can just do all that. And then I start to make my copyist life easier. I start inputting pretty early I use Sibelius sometimes. I use Finale, but Sibelius is kind of my go-to program. I started off in Finale, but now I'm a Sibelius guy.
Brianna Zapata would like to know, what is your favorite instrument?
My favorite instrument is the instrument that gets the job done. That's what I always say. So I play viola, violin, and piano. Those are like my major, major instruments that I would play in a studio situation. But yeah, literally, even from the composition standpoint, people ask, well, which one do you use to write on? And it's whatever gets the job done, I don't really have a favorite, it just depends on what I'm doing. And then I do a lot of different styles. So I play jazz and gospel. So, it's just whatever gets the job done.
Marilyn would like to know, have you ever doubted yourself?
I'm doubting myself tonight. That's why I got to get back to Big Sur. Because I gotta hone in on this piece. I got a November 30th deadline. So I mean that's always happening. That's not a constant thing, which is why I've hold off on myself. I'll go and sequester myself so I can really focus, especially during these times of elections and things of that sort. So it's been one of these things where I just really need to kind of. That's kind of the purpose in going to this place. It's like I said, there's no cell phones, there's no telephones, there's no internet. You can't, you're there. There's only Jim, the ranch hand, 2 horses and 2 mules, and that's it. and 1,000 acres.
And lots of birds and wild animals and the night sky if it's not foggy, and maybe can you hear the ocean?
In certain parts, if you're closer to because there's a hike that it's about I would say a quarter of a mile hike that I did this morning. So that's where you saw me. I did that hike this morning. Okay. And from up there, you can kind of hear the ocean. You'll hear more of Highway 1, but you can for sure see the ocean. It's amazing. But where I am in the cottage, there's a main house there, but I really stay in the cottage. It's just 1 bedroom, bathroom place. It has a fireplace, and you can't really hear anything there except for nature.
Several of our young students would like to know, how do you make a living playing music? I think you sort of answered that indirectly, but you do a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, I usually have a 5 income streams, and those come in variations of the film and TV. I still get royalties for those shows. Although I'm not actively writing for any television shows at the moment. I've really been focusing on the concert hall world. And then there's the concert hall world of commissions. And so those are ways that I make income. I'm also a professor. Like I said, I taught at my first quarter at Stanford was this past April. And I was at CSUMB as a professor there for 8 years between 2 different departments. Then I love to still play. I play in the symphony, Monterey Symphony, Santa Cruz Symphony, Stockton Symphony with Peter Jaffe and those guys up there. And I do that because I love playing, and I just to keep my chops up and especially if they're doing new music and things of that sort, I like to be involved. And then the fifth thing I kind of do is I kind of consult with churches. I do a lot of work with churches around the country. Even around the world, but mostly, but now I've really honed that down to California. So I do big Christmas shows. I music produce those shows. I do recordings. I record with different artists. So for me, I have to keep it kind of like that for me to do this. If I was just strictly composing, I'd probably lose my mind. Just like if I was just strictly playing, and again, those people that do that do it very well, but I have to keep it mixed up a little bit for me to stay fresh.
When you compose for film or TV, this is another question from our audience. Do you start with a script, or do you wait to see what has been filmed before writing the music?
So sometimes, like with a lot of daytime shows, I did a lot of daytime shows. So All My Children, As the World Turns, One Life to Live. A lot of those shows we created libraries of music for. So there was no script. Although there were times where there'd be like a wedding song, like Kelly Ripa, who's with well, now it's Kelly and Matt or something now. It used to be Regis and Kelly, or Kathy Lee, which I knew her back in the day as well. But she got married on All My Children, and so I did the wedding scene. And so times like that, I'll have the scene kind of ahead of time, and then I'll end up writing a song with an artist. And that was actually my first project that actually got me a job on All My Children in 1999, I think that was. Yeah. It was a while ago.
All right. Kelly, do you see any more questions from the audience that haven't been covered? There have been some sort of numerous topics on the same subject, so I just chose the one question.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I'm here for you guys.
Oh,
So
crap. Sorry, I was muted.
okay, I think probably covered most of the ones. There was one question that said, you said whatever gets the job done in terms of the instrument, and she wants to know what you mean by that.
Oh, I mean, whatever vehicle. It's kind of like if you decide to drive a Lexus or you drive a Porsche to the job. It's like whatever gets the job done. So, sometimes with with a lot of my composition, it's usually piano. That kind of gets the job done in sense of just being able to harmonically represent everything. With this violin concerto, though, I'm kind of taking my violin and viola down and trying some things, which is this will be my first violin concerto. I've written for violin, obviously, but now I take my instrument down with me to. So that's that. I use them. They are tools essentially for a composer, and I use them as such.
Cool. So I'd like to get into another area. It's what I call the hot topics in classical music these days.
Sure.
Equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's actually something that all of the arts, the world should be talking about, discussing, seeing where they want to go, where they want to be. In looking around, and as a trombone player, back in the day, I was a kind of an oddball. I had my share of old white guys who told me I shouldn't be in the music business and to go get married and have kids.
Exactly.
Almost everyone's probably got a story. But we're seeing more diversity of composers. We're seeing more women composing, playing in orchestras, more ethnic, cultural, racial diversity in composers, more genres and fusions of musical styles in chamber and orchestral music, which is really exciting because I think that's going to help bring in younger listeners, younger audiences, which we really need to build up on.
Right.
But, how do we increase the diversity of our orchestras and our audiences? They're almost all still very, very white. Most boardrooms are still very white. And I know a lot of it begins with equity and inclusion at a young age, where any young child who wants to play an instrument, for instance, should be able to, and money's no question, have lessons, have those same opportunities that other kids have. And of course, that's where Youth Music Monterey is playing a very important part in our community.
Right.
No kid is turned down to play in the orchestra for fear of financial need or other. So what are some of the things we can do? How can we make changes from your perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I always say that, diversity it has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. And that's the thing. It hasn't been all these years. My friend Terrence Blanger, I commend him on the first opera from an African American for the Met, and that's great, and I love that and applaud him for that. But the Met shouldn't pat themselves on the back because if that's one, and then the next 150 years we go and there's not another, then we haven't done anything. so we have to be intentional. We have to. And I think it's reflective of your demographic. I'm the kind of person now, yes, I am African American, but I also understand that numbers don't lie. If African Americans are 13% of this population of the United States of 320 million people, then, the numbers are going to be what they're going to be, but that doesn't mean that those opportunities should not be there for those people that want to do that. And a lot of times those glass ceilings have been there for women. They've been there for all different marginalized groups where they haven't been able to have the opportunities. And so So the thing is that we have to be intentional about our programming. I'm actually the vice president, one of the vice presidents on the AXO board, which is Association of California Symphony Orchestras, and actually my task force that I'm forming right now is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Task Force for our board. And it'll start with our board. I'm the only one on a board of 24. So, so the thing is that we need to represent what we're talking about as well. And so, but that has to be intentional, it has to be planned. And I think if we do more of that, especially in these communities where we have the, in here we are on the Central Coast, and we have Salinas, where we have a huge Latino community. Why hasn't the Monterey Symphony done more, works like that? I mean, Max was pretty cool with bringing in, we did Torina, we did Ginastera, we did, a couple of guys, but that should be something that's not kind of a one-off thing. It should be programmed into not only the program, the actual concert, but in the education series as well. When you go to the schools, the community engagement, those composers should be brought and educated and taught, just like Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, and the other guys, with just as much as importance.
That's great. Thank you. It's something we're all struggling with. And I think it's great. It's wonderful.
The thing that's great is that we're actually talking about it. And that's what I love that's happening across the board, and I have a lot of female amazing composers, from Clarice Assad to, a lot of good friends. And we're there. We're there. We just, it's just the opportunities are now.
We had an interview with Joanne Folletta back in September, and she and I were reminiscing about her time with the Women's Philharmonic. And, I'd always poo-pooed the idea of all-girl orchestras or bands or whatever, but because she was the conductor, I said, I'll play, I would love to play. And we were championing women's music, women composers from centuries ago to current day. And I'll tell you, it was so stimulating and so exciting to be performing music of alive composers, and composers who were right there to ask the questions about, to tell them, no, you can't write this for our instrument. It's not going to work. Can you try something else? It was much kind of a laboratory at times, and bringing the whole composition to the performance, to be doing the world premiere, it was incredibly exciting. And I mean, it's really cool.
I often say that I think Beethoven and Mozart would, if they were, if they came back in a time capsule, would say, "You guys are still playing my Symphony Number 40." Like, are you? I mean, there's got to be somebody doing something. It's like, so.
So we have a young lady who wants to know, what is your favorite song?
My favorite song.
It's a song or a symphony.
Okay, well, I would say, oh boy, that's a tough one. Oh God. I'm a huge fan of, well, oh man, New World Symphony. I love Dvorak. I love his work. That would, I get a lot of inspiration from him. The New World Symphony. I've played that a billion times. Even as a kid, I played it several times, a lot of times. As far as a particular song, I would say the New World Symphony would be a song per se.
Okay. Another question from our audience. In the interest of equity, diversity, and inclusion, do you think that auditions in major orchestras should no longer be blind? That's been a hot topic as well.
Yeah, I think that I think they I think they should be blind. I think they should be. I mean, because the human, and I've traveled around the world. I mean, I've gone to a lot of homogeneous, cultures, you know, in Asia and Africa and different places, and people with their sight, they develop certain biases just with that deal. It's kind of, unfortunately, a human nature, and it's not just white people. It's not just, you know, it's, and then you go down to, you know, Mexico City. I was in Mexico City last year, and just when people see things, they create a natural bias. So I think I'm kind of all for the blind auditions for sure.
Yeah, it's that's a tough one because, you know, an orchestra needs to find the very best player. And when we enacted blind auditions, it actually allowed for anyone to get on that stage, play their instrument, be heard without the bias of seeing that person.
Right.
And so that's a
But
very,
what I understand, those blind auditions didn't necessarily remain blind. Like when they got to the final round, usually then it was, oh, this is who's playing, and then you got the same issue kind of happening. So
exactly, yeah. And then you know, in some of those final rounds, it's not just who plays the best. They pick 3 people to spend a couple weeks with the orchestra, so the rest of the section can get a feel for the chemistry. How is it to work with that player? It's one thing to be a wonderful performer as an auditionee, but it's another to actually function in a section. And if people feel comfortable with you, you feel comfortable with them. So there's so much depth to the audition process these days. Much more so than it used to be, where a conductor would invite 3 or 4 people to come to his office and play, and he'd say, "You."
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, we are getting close to the 6 o'clock hour. So we have a couple of questions from Olivia and Oliver. One says, what would you have done if music was never your career?
Woohoo! Wow. I'd be an accountant. Well, I was headed that direction. I was going to be I was actually, before I went to NYU, I was doing a MBA at Johns Hopkins University. And so in finance, in 1996, I was doing a finance degree, and I was taking a cost accounting course that summer. And I thought, I can't do this. Let me do the music thing. If it doesn't work out, I can always fall back on basic statistics and cost accounting later on. But I moved to New York and I never looked back. So if I wasn't doing music today, I'd probably be a 7 series guy on Wall Street or something like that. You know.
Another question, do you get to travel a lot? And when you do you miss your family?
Yes, I do. In fact, COVID was a balancer in that way. You know, I last year I did 15 countries. I was in 15 different countries. Part of that was 2018, 2019, I had 4 commission works. So I told my wife at the time, I wanted to give myself the gift of travel, and so I did that, and started with Mexico City. And some of this was business. A lot of it was pleasure, just to see friends that I have in Granada, Spain, and Barcelona, and Madrid, and Lisbon. And then I was in Israel and Turkey, and though that was more leisure, and in Jordan. And then my daughter, we were in China last year, just before COVID, like September, literally. So, and then I was in Europe a lot, and then in West Africa for this piece that I'm doing with the orchestra in Pittsburgh. So I do travel a lot. I've gotten used to being home now. It's been great. When I have to get on a plane, it is a feat at this point, because I'm so used to being at home. So,
where would you like to be in 10 years? 20 years?
Yeah, people always ask me, you know, what is it you want to do? And for me, I'm doing it. I love writing music. I love commissions, and just, you know, that's what I would love to do. Love to be doing, and that's what I'm doing now. like a long-term. Oh, now I do. I have looked at doing a PhD at some point. Just for just because it was probably one of those goals I would have done. Had I not gotten into television music and doing commercials in New York, I would have gone to Columbia or stayed at NYU and done my PhD. But I started making a living in the world, and I was like, oh, I can always get back and do the PhD. And now that's been like 15 years ago, so 20 years ago now. But I think I will. There's some things I want to look at and study. It'll probably be an interdisciplinary kind of music and social justice, something like that. It'll be something interesting. It won't be composition.
So a few of us, including our conductor, are asking.
Oh, is he here? Oh my goodness.
Danko's here. Danko's here.
Maestro.
Hi, John.
Hey, sir, good to see you.
Good seeing you too again. And by the way, that's just a teasing question.
The question is, when are you going to write a work for Youth Music Monterey?
Oh, when we sit down and talk about it, let's do it.
Awesome. We'd love to. Yeah, that's something that's on my agenda for sure.
Yeah,
I'd love to get you in working with with our orchestra and writing for us. Have you ever been to a YMM concert?
I have not yet. I know.
Okay, you're a busy guy.
Typically, when you guys have had concerts, I've been out of town. I mean, like you said, I do travel a lot, and I perform a lot. But I am planning to make it to. What we did I know Monterey Symphony, we did a side-by-side concert, but that's not the same thing. So but I do plan to come. I've done a lot with Sacramento Youth Symphony. They didn't commission a work, but they did one of my early works one time. And what I did was they thought I was a ringer, so I sat in the viola section and played my own piece. And then the conductor at the last minute said, "And we have the composer right in the orchestra." And it was a great treat for the kids. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was like, "Who wrote this stuff? What the heck?"
You're listening to all kinds of comments, right? And they don't know you're there.
This viola part. What the heck was he thinking?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Well, I just want to say that we have many of our Youth Music Monterey students who are attending this session. We also have a lot of kids from our South County Strings program, which is done down in Soledad. We'd like to thank you for attending. Their teacher, Elise Rabideau, who's on our staff.
Yes.
And again, Danko said hello. And before we close, do you have any last words you'd like to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I if you had asked me, how many years ago? When I was a kid, 45 years ago. So if I was a kid, would I be doing what I'm doing now? I probably would have told you no. And so I tell kids to really pursue your dreams. And you guys have YouTube. You have so many things now at your disposal, and the technology is insane. So, pursue your dreams, because I mean, everything is at your fingertips. I mean, you guys. My daughter's like, "Oh, you want to learn how to do it? Just go look on YouTube. Here's the link." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." It's just I just finished my new website, and actually now I can actually program it. So like, I don't have to hire a guy to do it. It's in using a Weebly, and so it's so much more accessible. You just need the drive, and you need the discipline, the drive, and the passion. And that'll get you a long ways. You have the tools. The tools are there, but the commitment, the discipline. And make sure you practice. Make sure you study to show yourself approved. Do the studies, like I said, with the composition thing. Go if you want to be a composer. Don't just wing it. Do some serious composing classes. Walter Piston is a great book I used back in the day. There's a lot of techniques, learn your craft, and you'll go far.
Well, thank you, John Wineglass, for spending an hour with us. I'd like to again thank Joanne and Russell Hatch for their support of Fresh Perspectives, and also the Sequestered Super Supper Society for sponsoring tonight. And could we just all give a big round of applause to John for joining us, and also to each other as we continue on this fantastic path of making music, even during COVID-19, and look forward to in-person performances, and we'll get you to one. All right.
Yeah. And I also want to say, any of you guys, my email address, my website address is johnwineglass.com. You can email me anytime. This kids at USC, I told them that you can email me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I do a lot of just personal sessions with kids, and, advice, and that's free. It's not, anything like that, but things that you want to talk about, feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back to you.
Thank you so much, John.
No worries.
And I'm looking for that
you.
trombone part.
I'm gonna send it to you. Seriously.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We will now end the Zoom session.
Okay.
And
Take care.
appreciate you
See you,
joining.
Darko. All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh,
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
yeah. This is awesome. Wow.
This is very cute.
Kelly, take care.
Thank you.
This is awesome. This is cool. I don't want to leave.
You got that composition to finish, John.
Yeah, I got to get down to Big Sur. Now it's